that one did work, and that's why you may see some school districts still doing that today, if they're in a real catch-up kind of a mode. But the important part about that is there was a plan on the back end that said, okay, well, in 3 years, ours was actually 5 years, when those computers need to be replaced, there was cash in the bank to replace them on a district-wide level. So I'm hearing 10. That's not okay. There is no resolution on this, and I should ask this too. Towards the end, Mr. Street, you can decide whether you want this to come back as a resolution or just come back as a final draft and wave off on it and say, okay, it's up to the board. How formal you want it to be, but resolution. Okay.
I'd like to see it under consent for next time, unless we make some substantive changes. But I would be, I would be happy if we said, I don't know, you can do the wording, Mr. Gregory, but more than 10 years.
Okay.
I think that would make me happy.
Or do we want to say generally expected to last at least 10 years?
I like that wording.
Okay. I mean,
Yes.
for some unforeseen reason, okay, it's projected to last 8, but like the chairs from years ago, wow, we could have it for 15.
That's right. Well, that's true. Getting back to county definition, chairs are 7-year lives.
Yeah. And I think Rampart has some chairs that my wife sat in. They do. Rampart has some chairs my wife sat in.
My kids informed me, they all know the age of the furniture at Rampart based on the color and the design. All the kids know, so I don't know. Teachers know, so.
So, Mr. Gregory, will the schools will get together and they will come up with how they want to spend their money? Do they have to then present that plan to somebody, just get final approval?
And then that's what a couple of these bullets are getting at, is now it has to be vetted through a process. Not an opinion, not a subjective, well, I don't think that's a good idea, or,
Right.
does it meet the specs that are currently out there? Will it connect to our network and function as it's supposed to function without investing a whole lot of additional dollars, unanticipated investment of additional dollars. And here it says that I've added the PSSG, which is the supervisor or the principal. That's really from a knowledge standpoint. It's not, it uses the word approval, but sometimes a PSSG, somebody's got a different perspective, or even myself, because it has me on there too. So I could say, well, there might be a different way to do this same thing, that you get more bang for the buck, or it's just an alternative. There'll be a lot of these. It's $14.5 million at sometimes $10,000 or $15,000 a pop. Creates lots of projects. So I'm not looking to, investigate fully each one of them. They'll also go through a procurement process, so the scope will have to be well defined for bids to come in. It would also allow a chance to, if you have 35 schools out there procuring themselves, we could lose some of the economies of scale advantage. Let's use desks for an example. If elementary school A wants to replace, I'll say 400 desks, and elementary school B, C, and D also want to do 400 desks, I got to keep the math simple in my head. Instead of 400 or 4 different bids for 400 desks, it's better to do one bid for 1,600 desks, or 16,000 desks if it's larger in the school district, where then our purchasing, procurement staff can bundle these. But if there's not a vetting process to go through, there's no attempt to kind of get your arms around the whole thing and package some of these pieces. And some of them may not just be desks, but it's with the same vendor. You could put, or the same industry of vendors, if you will, put some things together that the same types of vendors could bid on a whole bunch of things, so that we're also trying to get the best bang for the buck, at the lowest cost, if you will, through the process also. So there's multiple reasons for it.
And what's that mechanism if there's, and desk probably aren't a good example for this, I'm guessing that they'll probably be 12 months apart. Somebody's not going to order a desk in summer when whenever they're using it to do something that coincides with the school year. So that's a bad example. There's got to be some things that people might order a quarter apart or 4 months apart. How's that mechanism make sure that you get the best, really the economy scale on that?
Depending on what it is, Mr. Strebe, I think we would recommend trying to push them, get rid of the 4-month separation. And if they're delivered earlier than what they want, we can hold them in the warehouse or something so that it works out for whatever their purpose is at the school. So my first recommendation would be, let's try to remove that. The second one would be we can still bundle them, but have different, we'll call it delivery dates. And it's still, my previous example, 1,600 desks, just spread over a bit of a time. We don't ever pay for anything in full until we've received it. So the only piece of that would be holding off a little bit of the payment. But to get around that, my suggestion of, we'll go ahead and deliver it, and we'll find a place to store stuff until the school is ready to have it on site.
Trying to make sure the mechanism's there, make sure that we don't order something 3 months apart, 4 months apart.
Yep. We'll also have these, they're not going to submit them. My vision of it is they're not going to submit one project at a time. The committee is going to say, okay, we've met, Discovery Canyon Elementary is done meeting, and they've landed on an agreeable list, prioritized, whatever it is, 15 items. And they may have an idea of dollar amounts, but not for sure yet. So they're not locked in yet. We're not going to lock them in yet because it's not fair. We may have all of them bid, or at least the top percentage, 10 or whatever it is, to get costing on them, so they know now, okay, we had $300,000. Now we know what the real costs are for some of these things. They might be able to, we might be able to work down the list a little bit more. My point to that is, we'll have the list of 15 items. If every school has 15 items, we'll have all of those, and we can start looking at them kind of from a larger picture versus submitting one project at a time. Because if that happens, we will run into, hey, we just ordered a bunch of desks 2 months ago.
Ms. Mayor?
Mr. Gregory, you bring up a great point here, and I'm glad you said it the way you did, because that's what I was envisioning. And further, I would say, I know you are responsible for navigating the DAC budget subcommittee, and the processes that we go through, and that we receive that report from them every January or February, whatever the timing is right now. They do they get information from their SACs about how to spend school improvement dollars, and that's an annual process. It would be my expectation that we would add this to that process in January. Is there a reason we couldn't do that? Would that give, if the bond passes in early November, then would those school site improvement committees have time to formulate their lists, and could they report out as part of that to the DAC? You see where I'm going with this?
They're going to be asked to have those finalized prior to November 8th. Well, hopefully mid-October. Soon here, I'll be getting out to them saying you need to reconvene the committees. You can use the project or the dollar amounts that were identified on there to work through, and think about it again. Time has passed. They've had, I know I've used this with Mr. Strebe before. They're probably smarter today than they were 6 months ago, and understanding even just process. Okay, now I see how this whole thing fits together. It's starting to make sense. Maybe they need to reprioritize, or maybe something new has come up, whatever it is. But that I'd like to be final prior to election. So having it available in January wouldn't be a problem, with an asterisk that, I don't want to lock schools in so tightly that they've lost flexibility to spend dollars 2 years from now if needs have changed. The other caveat I would put to that is, my suggestion would be, my recommendation would be that DAC doesn't have approval authority. They're receiving the information. The school committee is, I'd hate to see the DAC trump what a school committee has viewed upon, but it's great information during that time period because it kind of creates the whole picture now of what's going on in the school. from not only operations, but a capital standpoint.
Agreed, because through our regular process right now, DAC does not have veto authority. They simply receive the information. It's just a matter of, for those of you not familiar with it, it's a matter of every DAC representative is required to go back to their SAC, and every SAC is required to discuss the school's priorities for spending its money that year and bring it back. And then what happens is the principal and the DAC member come back and they report out in January to the DAC. They do a whole report, and we also line them up by feeder systems. We have conversations that way. And then that's all what goes into the report that we receive. I believe it's February. I think that's right. But we receive that report annually. So I'm envisioning that this piece would simply be an additional part of that report for every school. And the reason that I asked for it, as you said, it'll be available before then, but that gives us the foundation for then next year. We always take a look forward and we take a look back. So then next year, we'll be able to take a look back, and those committees, if the school does decide to readjust a priority or something happens that changes it and they no longer have that need, or they were able to meet it in a different way, that would be part of their report out, because if their needs change and they didn't, if they say we're going to spend in a typical year, we're going to spend most of our money on, let's say, professional development, and then for some reason a need comes up and they spend it on something different, they come back and explain what happened. So that's exactly the same process. I'd like to see this simply rolled into that process. It's a separate piece of it. I think that provides one more piece of accountability to our community, and it's also a way of everyone on our DACs, and then of course they bring all of the DAC reps, bring all the information back out to the other school accountability committees. It's another way of sharing information, plus it's a way of sharing it with the board. It's a point in time at which we can see, and as these things happen, I would expect, I won't be on the board then, Mrs. Bullock and I will be gone. But this is the mechanism we'll leave behind for accountability, because you all will see those things as they get built, checked off the list. Yes, in fact, this did happen. So that's, I guess that would be my request, and that would be how I would like to see it work.
Do you like it identified on this document?
I don't know if this document, I'm not sure if this document is the place for that or not. I don't know. What do you all think? I don't quite.
I think this is the framework. This is the framework of the formula parameters. That's about how they're going to use the money. I don't see this as being the piece that says here's how we're going to account, here's how we're going to be accountable. So I think that's something that has to be developed, but it doesn't have to be a part of the formula parameters.
I agree with you. I think it would be.
One is being accounted.
I think it would be part of that piece that Mr. Gregory referred to, is that he's going to soon let all of the principals know that they need to get their SSICs together again. I think that's part of that. So maybe perhaps that makes sense there. We want your school site improvement committees to get together, and you're going to give them their parameters for when they need to have all that done, because you said we're going to have it done by the bond. And then furthermore, this is all going to be part of your school accountability process, and it's going to feed up to DAC and so on and so forth. That makes sense to me. That would go there.
Between now and when you see this next time also, I would like to get it out to at least principals to look at too, so they may have questions, or that would be able to provide, maybe fill in the blanks somewhere. You don't see some words on here tonight that may be on there based on a principal or several principals' questions that seem, that this isn't clear enough to them, so I can clean it up a little bit, but that would happen in between then also potentially.
Ms. Manning?
I have one more request that goes along with this, because we're brainstorming now, and this is the good stuff. We heard tonight from some folks who said that they want detailed information about, that list was pretty long of all of the major projects that was put out in our resolution. But that I believe probably what they're talking about with the detailed, we heard some things about outdoor seating for athletic events at DCC High School. Well, that was their #1 per pupil formula bucket A, request. But I understand why people didn't think that the board considered it, because that's in this big binder. You'd have to go through this. So what I'm wondering is, if we could take that column that has their, it was called per pupil formula, now it's called fairness formula. I'm wondering if we could take all of that and put it out there for our community, just take it, it's out there, but it's probably hard for them to find and hard for them to parse out. If we could take it and put it out there and ask all of our principals to let their community know, this is what our school site improvement committee came up with. At DCC High School, they said, add outdoor seating for athletic events, upgrade lighting and sound in auditorium, upgrade gym floor and AV system, blah, blah, blah. And that's what your fairness formula dollars would go to, unless the school site improvement committee made changes to that. So I'm wondering if perhaps there's a mechanism for us to do that now, just so that people can see. Because, and I think of this because I received a call from someone who said, what happened to the restroom remodels at Rampart? That was a big deal with our improvement committee, and I don't see it anywhere in this bond stuff. And I said, oh, it's right there in your column.
Disguised as a dollar amount.
That's right, it's disguised as just a lump sum dollar amount. It's fairness, that's right, it's fairness formula dollars, and all of this stuff, and your science room equipment that you asked for and everything, it's in that piece. But, so I'm wondering, anyway, if we could do that now and ask principals to get the information out to their community, and we could put it up on their websites or, whatever, just so that people do understand that this is what the GCNC said, and this is what your school site improvement committee said, and really, I mean, the board really did honor the work of this committee and the work of the individual school committees. We didn't get into their business. It's all still here.
The only, I agree. I think it provides much more clarity. I also think we would just do it inside of the existing project list, not resolving to change the resolution per se, just providing that detail, bullets.
Yes,
kind of
and
stuff.
that's what I mean. I don't mean change the resolution. I'm sorry, I may not have been accurate in what I was trying to say. I mean something separate. I mean a separate piece of information, an information piece that we could simply put out to provide more detail.
Ms. Van Meter, my only suggestion would be we give them a chance to confirm that that's still their list.
Well,
Sure.
And then as soon as possible.
the other problem is if these items don't have dollars attached to them, there may be some schools that ask for a whole lot more than their dollars, and then you have other schools that got a lot more dollars than what they asked for. So,
We'll put, my view of it would be, we put everything that they had listed on there. I don't know if that will create confusion, but that's part of the school communication that needs to happen then about eventually where, if the list is too long, exceeds the budget, the dollar amount we're allocated, then there's obviously got to be a line drawn in there somewhere. Because obviously the threat to not to do that is an expectation that something that was below that line is an expectation that's now not going to happen, or could happen elsewhere, depending on the cost of it.
Well, I guess my concern about this is timeliness, because what I want to make sure people understand is there was work out here, and it is public, and there's a list, and I want them to be able to understand, perhaps you may not get everything on this list because there's not dollar amounts attached, but I would love it if we could communicate this right away, because the mechanism, we all know from doing this kind of work. I mean, even if Mr. Gregory sent out an email tomorrow, principals try to convene their school site improvement committees, it would be at least a couple of weeks before they would even convene the committee, then they'd come back and look at it, then they would put something out. In the meantime, what I'd really like for people to be able to see is that these things weren't forgotten. They're actually out there, and we're going to do them. I'd really like to turn this conversation back to more of what we are doing. We're doing $230 million of great things for kids. I don't want people to think that the detailed things that matter that they see every day, like a bath that needs to be remodeled, I don't want that to overshadow the great things that we're doing for kids. I don't want there to be misinformation and more lack of information than anything. again, I don't say there's a lack of information, it's all right here, but you would have to understand how to look at this report to find it. And that's more my concern. So is there a way that we could get that information out there and simply say, this is what your SSIC says? Now, we're not guaranteeing that. We have to put dollar amounts to it. They're reconvening. They're going to start working immediately. But this is what they said. So the people actually know that it's there. And it wasn't lost or forgotten or buried. That it made it in. Because a lot of things that people are talking to me about are on the list. They're probably going to make it because they're first up on the list.
You have to have a big caveat, because there are a lot of things that they ask for, which we just told them they can't have. Like
Yeah, we have
projectors and
the other thing is, correct,
snow blowers
correct.
and-
Yes.
I need to, I think that's, I can do that as soon as I'll get with Allison and we'll put that table, because we're just talking about the table, and really one part of the table that lists all the dollar amounts, so that's not an issue. I just want to make sure that I have them in the correct prioritized order. That's the only thing I want to make sure of. Understanding they can reconvene and possibly change the order or projects, but I agree that putting something out there that has more detail may be helpful.
Ms. Johnson?
I really applaud that suggestion. I think it, all of us feel better. Would the list include the language along with the caveats, et cetera, but would it also say this is what the board anticipated when we approved? This is, I mean, not just here's your list, but also this is what we thought we were approving, you know, that these items here would be, were on the list to be accomplished. I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to just say, here's the list, because that doesn't say that to me, that doesn't say the board looked at this, was aware of this, thought about this, debated this. We did all that, and we felt it was under this fairness formula allotment, and so that was why when we hear, oh, you didn't do this, we're surprised. And so how do we include or recognize the fact that we did anticipate that these things were on the list and that we're going to be accomplished? And maybe we don't. I'm just, as long as we're brainstorming, which is so much fun, is it something that we would want to include, or do we just say, this is everything that the board anticipates? I don't know. I'm just asking. It might be too much.
Can I suggest something?
Yes.
Thank you. On each of your agenda items, you always have this background section,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's related to this or anything else, there's a kind of a contextual piece to it. And what I'm envisioning is the table, not all the whereases, but to the table, and above that table, I could put the kind of a contextual piece, like what you might find in a background statement, not necessarily this one, but it may be part of this one, that just is above that first table, that gives context, background, whatever you want to call it, to what follows, and it could capture those kinds of things.
Sounds appropriate.
Factual kinds of things.
Yeah, I agree. After reading this, you could take 3/4 of what's in the background for this one, and yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. Because it says what we did. And if bond authorization is granted, one component of this resolution includes allocating approximately $4.5 million to school communities for capital improvements identified by a team of stakeholders, blah, blah, blah. That's it. Yes. That's the explanation, I think. Good idea.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Gurley. All CASB conferences, we've talked about this a couple of times, and if you are going to attend, then please get your registration and talk to Ms. Sadat. The CASB Region 6 meeting is September 19th. The Doubletree Hotel is 4:30 to 8:30. The CASB Fall Delegate Assembly is October 14th and 15th, Fort Collins Marriott. And the CASB annual convention is actually a week later. This year is December 8th through the 11th. So
So
it's-
she sent us an invite and we just say, yes, that's good enough, right?
it's- Make sure you talk to us about it. Questions? Next, 13, other business, video recording and board meetings, or video recording of board meetings. And one of the conversations that we definitely want to have is, we had a linkage, and there were a handful of people there. I know 3 of us were at the linkage, and I want to open it up and ask the question, what did you hear? What were your thoughts? And what are your comments? Sam Maynard.
Took a few notes. And I would say the first thing, when we tried to open with the question about ways in which people would like to communicate, I didn't really hear any new ideas of anything that we're not already doing, with the exception of video. We got some information there. It was noted that middle school and high school meetings, when we started talking about DAC and Parent Sounding Board and reporting back to our PTOs and such in our communities, one of our patrons mentioned that middle school and high school meetings are not well attended. It's great in elementary school because everybody's all gung-ho and they all go to the meetings. But we really didn't, we just kind of, that was the observation. Not sure what we can do about that, but that might be something that, we think about in the future. I know a lot of those folks who run those things work really hard to get people there, and the observation was made, it's just a time of life when your kids are extremely busy, a lot of stuff going on. So perhaps that method doesn't work for them. However, there was no suggestion made that we shouldn't do that. So I think, there's no reason that we shouldn't continue the practice. It's just noted that they're more well attended by elementary parents. I heard there was one of our folks who started asking about student government opportunities and students having input, and we've seen from our policies and our communications and such that Dr. Hatchell has students giving input, and that is not something, the board receives input through linkages, like we've gone out and shadowed our students, we've gone out and had pizza and bagels and things with them and such, but we do not have a regularly occurring piece of that, so that was just a side comment that was made. Then I heard from people that video allows access. There were questions about could we audio record on, and put that right on our website, and I think we could do that today, and I would recommend that we do that. There's no reason not to. I think that we should. I mean, we already have the audio recording, so that would be a relatively simple thing to do at no cost, is to add a place on the website where people can simply click to hear the audio recording. That would be very easy. Minutes are problematic. We had a conversation about that, and that's information that we already knew, but I think it was great to have the conversation about it. Minutes, because the requirement is to have the board approve the minutes, and the board can only approve minutes and make a decision while it's in a meeting. The only time you can approve minutes are the next meeting. So then by the time minutes are approved, it's 2 weeks after anything happens. So if there's really timely pieces of information, or we talk about dealing with something at the next meeting, there's no way for the public, if they only read meeting minutes, to know about it. So that was just a problem as noted, and that's simply kind of part of the mechanism of meeting minutes. There were some folks who indicated that indexing is important. They would want, whether it's video or audio, they would like to link to board docs and have the particular section. So if we're talking about the bond, they want to be able to go there and click and just hear that piece of the recording, not have to listen to the whole thing end to end or fast forward through it and try to find what they're listening for. Heard that as an important piece of this. And we also heard the comments about needing to engage digitally, especially those 30-ish crowd like to engage digitally, and I think a lot of people of all ages do. Right now, I think interestingly enough, we're kind of going through this with my 75-year-old mother. I mean, it's a whole new world to her to engage digitally, particularly when there's bad weather. We can't leave the house. So we tried to talk a little bit about cost versus value, but I really didn't hear any strong statements about, you know, I want this level of quality, but only if it costs this much, or we really couldn't get there, you know what I mean? We just had a general conversation, yeah, we kind of ran out of time for that. So those are the things that I heard.
Mrs. Fuller?
Yeah, and agreed, and, you know, one of the things, I guess, was kind of, an eye-opener to me is I think we are making this too complicated, and that, in my mind, it was going to cost a lot more than what some of the input was saying, and I don't know if the input is accurate. I'm not a video technical person. I can't even run the remote control on my TV, because I don't ever watch the TV. And so, you know, my husband's like, can you please record that game? And I don't know how to do that. You gotta step me through that. So, you know.
Still have children.
Yes, you know, I can do computers, I don't do video and stuff. But, I think from what was said, it's a lot cheaper than I think we were making it out to be. And, you know, and that's really, you heard me say before, that was my big heartburn. I did not want it to cost a lot of money. When I talked to my constituents and patrons and whatnot, you know, most of them don't intend to ever watch it, and they don't think that we should spend a lot of money on something they don't intend to watch. But I know that it's important to some people, and so if we can do it inexpensively, then let's do it. And it sounds like we can, you know, from what was said at this meeting, that we can do it for under a couple $1,000s. And if we can do it, then let's do it. Let's, you know, just do it and be done with it, and move on. Those people, you know, and I do like the idea of linking it to board docs, because I think that's probably true. If you have a 3-hour meeting and you just wanted to see what we talked about on fair campaign practices act, and click on that and you can watch that little video. And yeah. That's my thought. That's what I heard.
I was going to suggest, you know, to that end, I did hear to people's points that is important to them. The indexing piece, I also heard that it was important to people that they be able to see the speakers at the podium, that they be able to see us, and that they be able to see what's up on the screen. And that came across pretty loud and clear. Would you agree with that? That sounded to me like that's what people wanted to see. They wanted to see all of that. I would also say, you know, so when we were talking about that, it's still the quality issue. As you said, Mrs. Bullock, I'm not terribly a technophile. I could get rid of, if someone got rid of my TV tomorrow, I wouldn't know about it for a couple of weeks. So I don't really get to it very often. I get most of my content through audio on podcasts while I drive and run and exercise. So it's very different for me. But I understand. I think we need to, you know, we need to take into account that there are a lot of people who want to see it that way, and they do want to see the nonverbal communication pieces and that sort of thing. So I think it's important. Well, I don't know. I had another thought, but I lost it. I'll get back to it in a minute.
I heard we weren't very entertaining.
That's,
I heard all of those things, and very much a propensity to want to video record, and again, indexing. I know that kind of stuff doesn't happen the right way, because this is about as a training session, and how you do that. Need to work on that. And I've heard, you know, so I heard that at the leakage, and I've also heard from folks out there that some don't want to spend the money, and you get folks that say absolutely do it. You know, I like it too. At the credit union, if we ask the